Hello everyone, it's 1 p.m. Central Time. I would like to give 2 more minutes before we start this webinar so other people can get on if they're still waiting. All right, I'd like to go ahead and get started with this webinar. My name is Hideyuki Terashima, and I am an employee at the Illinois State Water Survey. The Water Survey is a division of the Prairie Research Institute, which is located at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And today I'll be talking about wateroperator.org, which is a website that we developed to serve as a clearinghouse for publicly available resources for water and wastewater system operators. And I would also be providing an overview of the stage 1 and 2 disinfectants and disinfection byproducts rule, while featuring resources that we have found that are publicly available to help water system comply with the DBPR rules. So these are just some housekeeping before we started. This webinar is scheduled for an hour and a half and will be recorded. The recording to the webinar will be uploaded to our wateroperator.org YouTube channel upon completion of this webinar. If you have any questions, please go ahead and use the GoToWebinar interface to ask your question. If you look at the tool, you should see a section that says questions, where you can type and send us a question either anonymously or you can actually send it to everyone as well. We will review these questions at the end. For this webinar, we did not seek approval for this webinar to provide credits, but we will provide a certification of completion after the webinar is over upon request, so that you can try to get credits from your state agency that approves trainings. You can email us at info@wateroperator.org email address for the certificate at the end of the webinar. So this is the outline of today's webinar. I will begin with a brief introduction of what is wateroperator.org. Then for the majority of the webinar, I'll be talking about stage 1 and 2 DBPR, the requirements of the rules, and resources which are publicly available to help water system comply with the rule. After that, I will demonstrate how to use the wateroperator.org website to find these resources, as well as other resources that are publicly available. And then we will finish off by reviewing the questions that you have sent to us. So what is wateroperator.org? Again, it's a website that we developed here at the University of Illinois in collaboration with the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, or RCAP, with funding from the US EPA. It serves as a clearinghouse of publicly available resources to help small water and wastewater system operators. To use our website, there is no fee or registration required, so you can go on, you can type in the URL right now and access our website and go ahead and use it. So the 2 notable features on our website is our nationwide calendar and our resource library. We have a database of over 800 organizations, such as national organizations like EPA, individual state agencies, regional association, and even some vendors. We have staff that visit each of these organizations' website and collect information on events that offer continuing education credits for operators. These events could be conferences, webinars, basic trainings, pretty much any event, again, that offers CUs, we will list on our calendar. This calendar is meant to help operators save time from having to search through numerous organizations' website and find all the relevant events on a single calendar. To give you an idea of how much data we collect, we enter over 10,000 events to this calendar annually. The second feature is our resource library. Similar to our calendar, our staff visits and collect relevant and useful publicly available resources such as fact sheets, reports, manuals, presentations from over 800 of these organizations and list them in our library so that operators can save time having to sift through numerous pages of Google search results, which may not always provide what they're looking for. Just to give you an idea, we currently have over 15,000 documents in our library, and it's always constantly growing. We always make sure to link to the host organization and credit them in case there are some state folks here in this webinar and we highlight some of those resources. We always make sure to credit the host. So this webinar series is supposed to highlight some of those resources which we have added to our library in the past and help attendees learn about new resources which they may not have known about and how you can search for those resources. This is part 2 of the compliance-related webinar series that we are hosting, and today's topic will be on the disinfectants and disinfection byproducts rule, also known as the DBPR. Now, before I begin, we have 2 caveats that I would like to mention. We'll be sharing resources from the US EPA and individual states. Some states may have more stringent requirements than the federal regulation. So these resources will be shared as examples that are helpful to better understand the requirements, an example for state programs who may be interested in improving their own materials to make them more effective. We are also not regulatory experts. We can help you find resources that you didn't know existed and connect you with individuals who can help you. Questions about specific regulatory requirements are best addressed to your privacy agency. If you don't know whom to contact, that's something that we can help you with. So, what is the disinfection byproducts rule? There are US EPA regulations which have been developed to improve public health protection by lowering public exposures to disinfection byproducts, or DBPs, and high levels of disinfectant residuals, while maintaining microbial pathogen control. Why is this necessary? Well, there have been various studies which have been conducted in the past to determine the health effect on humans due to DBP exposures. A lot of studies tested DBP exposure on laboratory animals, and it showed that long-term exposure to high-level DBPs had the potential to increase the risk of cancer, provide liver kidney problems, and cause reproductive and developmental problems. So due to these potential health risks to humankind, the US EPA adopted the Stage 1 and 2 disinfectants and disinfection byproducts rule to monitor and reduce DBPs to protect the public health. So I'll go into more details about both of these rules in a few slides. But before we do, let's go over what exactly DBPs are, how they form, and how they form. So DBPs are chemical compounds which form when disinfectants like chlorine dioxide, or even ozone that are most commonly used in water treatment facilities throughout the US react with natural organic matter or inorganic substances that are present in raw water. These natural organic matters are byproducts from the decay of organic matter and are usually represented in water as total organic carbon. So for example, let's say there's a leaf on a tree that falls on the ground, that'll eventually decay into carbon particles, and that'll seep into the ground, eventually get into the groundwater, and that could be the potential source of total organic carbon. Inorganic carbon are compounds, also like bromide, is a chemical compound that's commonly found in nature. So there are currently over hundreds of known DBPs which have been found in drinking water, but EPA has determined that the following 4 DBPs are required to be regulated and monitored. These are the TTHMs, or total trihalomethanes, which is a group of 4 DBPs which form when chlorine reacts with natural organic matter or inorganic precursors. HAA5, or haloacetic acids, which is a group of 5 DBPs which form when chlorine reacts with natural organic matters or inorganic precursors. Bromate, which forms when ozone is used to disinfect water containing bromide, and chloride, which forms when chlorine dioxide is used to treat water. Generally, TTHMs and HA5 are the majority of the DBPs that are present in drinking water, and a lot of the studies that are conducted for DBP compliance usually focus on these 2 groups. So where do these DBPs form? They can form during water treatment and can also form in the distribution system post-treatment. If sufficient total organic carbon is not removed from the source water, disinfectants can react with TOC during treatment to form DBPs. Chlorine disinfectants also form disinfectant residuals, which is a low level of usually chlorine remaining in the water after initial disinfection at the water treatment plant. These chlorine residuals are important to make sure to disinfect pathogens or microbes that are present in the distribution system. But these residuals can also react with dissolved natural organic matter in the distribution system or biofilm located in the distribution system to form DBPs. There are various factors which can affect the formation of DBPs. The concentration of TOC in the source water, disinfectant type and dosage can affect how much DBPs form as well. Chlorine tends to produce the most DBPs. Chlorine dioxide and chloramines produce less, and ozone does not form TTHM or HA5, but again, it can form bromate. Water temperature can also affect the formation of DBPs. Generally, chemical reactions that form DBPs are sped up in warmer water, so DBP levels tend to increase during warmer months of the year. Water chemistry, such as pH, will also affect which DBPs will form more. For example, HAA5 is more likely to form in low pH water, and TTHM is more likely to form in higher pH water. Bromide presence will again lead to the formation of brominated DBPs. Water age is another factor which is important for formation of the DBPs in distribution systems. TTHM concentration tends to be highest in older water in the distribution system, so sections after storage tanks or dead ends, and low population areas where water flow can be stagnant. That's where you'll usually find higher levels of TTHMs. HA5 also prefers to form with increased water age, but HA5 formation is a little bit more complicated, where it favors low disinfectant residuals, which indicates older water, but favors areas where there are no biological activity, such as biofilms, because studies have shown that biofilms can biodegrade HA5s. So now that we know a little bit more about DBPs, we can move on to the actual rules that regulate these DBPs. So first we'll review the Stage 1 DBPR, which was first announced in 1998 and went into effect in 2002. This rule, which affects all community water systems and non-transient, non-community water systems which use chemical disinfectants or oxidants, and transient non-community water systems which utilize chlorine dioxide in their treatment. The rule was implemented to address the public health concern associated with DBPs and to update the original total trihalomethane rule, which EPA published in 1979. The rule established maximum residual disinfection level goals and maximum residual disinfection levels for chlorine, chloramines, and chlorine dioxide. It also established maximum contaminant levels and goals for the 4 DBPs that I mentioned previously. Water systems are required to develop a monitoring plan for the disinfectants and the DBPs, monitor their water by collecting samples and having them analyzed by an accredited laboratory, and to report to the state the DBP concentrations as well as residual concentrations. Monitoring requirements differ depending on the source of the water that water system used. So if you were on a groundwater source or if you were on surface water source, your monitoring frequency and the amount of samples you take differed. And population served is also another factor that affected that. Systems were either monitoring on quarterly or annual frequency, and system using surface water sources were also required to meet TOC removal requirements. Compliance for TTHM and HA5 was determined by calculating the RAA, which is the running annual average, of all the monitoring sites for each system. So this meant that after every quarter, TTHM and HA5 results from all the monitoring sites were averaged and submitted to the state. This meant that, this was later determined to be not the most ideal option, since this method ignores the presence of high DBP concentrations for certain monitoring results. So for example, if one site had high DBP and another site had low DBP, the average would turn out to be less than the higher DBP concentration, but there would still be the issue of that high DBP site, which this method did not take into account of, and that still posed a risk to the public. So the stage 1 DBPR focused on DBP sampling at location with maximum residence time, but that new research at the time determined that this did not necessarily indicate the highest level of HA5, since it was found that HA5 degrade and distribution system over time. And again, the original monitoring method or reporting method wasn't accurate. So this resulted with the EPA implementing the stage 2 DBPR to complement some of the components of the stage 1 DBPR, while improving the compliance monitoring requirements for TTHM and HA5. The stage 2 DBPR still applies to the same systems of stage 1, but now also includes consecutive systems or combined systems that use chemical disinfectants or oxidants. So systems that purchase water from a wholesale system would still be required to follow the stage 2 DBPR. So the stage 2 introduced various new requirements. These include the requirements to complete a initial distribution system evaluation, or IDSE, which evaluates current monitoring locations along with our stage 1 DBP monitoring locations, and determines new monitoring sites if necessary with the new IDSE requirements. Systems were also required to develop a compliance monitoring plan and continue DBP and residual monitoring. Sampling frequency and number of samples that systems need to collect were updated. The methods for determining compliance for TTHM and HA5 were also updated by requiring locational running annual averages, or LRAA, instead of the original RAA. So this means that MCLs for TTHM and HA5 will be calculated at individual monitoring sites instead of taking the average of all the sites. And compliance must be met at individual sites. The stage 2 DBPR also introduced operational evaluation requirements, which water systems and quarterly monitoring are required to complete. They are required to calculate operational evaluation levels every quarter, which helps water systems observe if their DBP concentration is increasing. And this helps to evaluate their system and make corrective actions before an MCL violation occurs. And again, for all these requirements, I'll be going a little bit into more detail in the later slides. So here is a quick summary again of the changes between the stage 1 and 2 DBPR. Monitoring frequency and number of samples were updated, necessary were updated. This information can be found on EPA's stage 1 and 2 DBPR quick reference guide. I'll be talking about that later as well. Systems were required to conduct an IDSE or update their compliance monitoring plans to select better sampling locations for TTHM and HA5. Compliance evaluation method were changed from the RAA to the LRAA to better represent DBP concentrations within a distribution system, and the new OEL requirements were introduced. Now, before I go into details for each individual requirements, I would like to highlight some short fact sheets that will recap the information that I pretty much just covered. So basically fact sheets that provide brief summaries of each of the rules. The first fact sheet is the comprehensive disinfectants and disinfection byproduct rule, stage 1 and 2 quick reference guide. This is a 4-page fact sheet from the US EPA, and it provides a summary of the requirements of the stage 1 and 2 DBPR. There are various tables that provide information on the requirements of the rules. There's tables listing what the regulated contaminants and disinfectants are and their respective MCL and MCL goals. A table to help water system determine their routine monitoring requirements, OEL requirements, and how they're calculated, and TOC removal requirements from the source. The table includes information for both stage 1 and 2 to show you which requirements were carried over, which requirements were newly introduced, and which requirements were updated from the past. The reference guide provides all the required information you need to know to comply with the rule. However, some parts may be a little confusing to those viewing this for the first time, so new operators may get slightly confused if they look at this chart. Which is why I included additional fact sheets to help you better understand the rule. The next fact sheet is the Stage 1 DBPR fact sheet from EPA. This is a 4-page fact sheet which provides more detailed information on the rule of the history, why DBP are a public concern, who must comply with the rule, the monitoring requirements under the Stage 1 DBPR, and TOC removal requirements. And the interesting thing about this fact sheet is it includes a short cost and benefit analysis where EPA estimates the estimated increased cost for water consumers due to the changes water systems will have to implement to comply with the rule, but also the benefits from the reduction in TTHM levels and potentially the risk, lowering the amount of cancer caused by less consumption of these DBPs. The fact sheet also includes information on additional EPA documents which were developed to supplement the Stage 1 rule. These include the Guidance Manual for enhanced coagulation and enhanced precipitate softening, which is required for to control TOC in the source. Alternate Disinfectants and Oxidants Guidance Manual, which talks about what alternate disinfectants you can use other than chlorine to reduce the formation of DBPs. Microbial and Disinfection Byproduct Simultaneous Compliance Manual, which is a manual that discusses how how water systems can be affected when they implement Stage 1 DB or changes to their system to comply with the Stage 1 DBPR, which can affect their compliance with other Safe Drinking Water Act regulations. The next fact sheet is the Stage 2 DBPR fact sheet from EPA. This is similar to the previous fact sheet I mentioned before. It's a 4-page fact sheet, and it uses a question and answer kind of format to help water system understand what the Stage 2 rule is. So what the rule requires, who must comply with the rule, another cost-benefit analysis where EPA quantifies how many cases of bladder cancer can be mitigated from the new rule, as well as approximate increases in household costs due to water systems having to implement changes to their system. The fact sheet also includes other guidance manuals that are available to assist with Stage 2 compliance, which I'll be highlighting later in this presentation. The next 2 fact sheets I'll showcase are shorter, less technical fact sheets, and they're great resources that summarize the information of DBPs and DBPRs. To help the public as well as new operators to learn about the rule. So this is a 1-page fact sheet from the Ohio EPA, and it uses layman's term to provide information on what DBPs are, why they are regulated, what are the health effects of consuming DBPs, what happens when MCL are exceeded, and what home treatment options are available. So it's a great fact sheet it contains information that are helpful to provide to your consumers if they have concerns about DBPs in their water. The next fact sheet is a 2-page fact sheet from the Washington Department of Health. This fact sheet is geared more towards new operators learning about DBPR and provides information on what DBPs are, who the rule applies to, monitoring requirements. I decided to include this because Washington DOH has a great webpage on DBPs. They have an FAQ on their DBP page, as well as additional fact sheets, shorter fact sheets on chlorination, which helps you understand the chlorination process and how it can form DBPs, and a alternate disinfectant fact sheet, which provides you options of alternate disinfectants while providing a list of pros and cons to help a water system that might be considering changing their disinfectant understand what the best possible option may be for their system. So now let's talk about the individual components of the requirements of the Stage 2 DBPR. The first is the initial distribution system evaluation. When the Stage 2 was implemented, water systems were required to complete an evaluation to re-evaluate their current monitoring locations on their sampling plan and use those results along with previous Stage 1 monitoring results to find the highest DBP locations for their Stage 2 compliance monitoring sites. There are 4 options to comply with this requirements. 2 of those were the very small system waiver and a 4030 certification, which were considered simplified evaluations since public water systems who apply for these options did not have to complete evaluation. These are only available to systems with small distribution systems or historically low DBP levels. The more interesting options were the system-specific study and the standard monitoring options. System-specific study utilized existing widespread historical data if water system collected them to determine new monitoring sites, or if water systems had the capacity, they could develop a hydraulic model of their distribution system along with their historical data to better model their system and predict where the high DBP locations would be. The other option was the standard monitoring option, which consisted of a year of monitoring of new monitoring sites complying with the IDSE requirements, in addition to Stage 1 locations to determine peak historical month as well as new monitoring sites. So the deadline to complete an IDSE has already expired, so EP does not require new or system that modify their treatment systems to include disinfectants to complete an IDSE, but new systems are still required to complete a compliance monitoring plan that meets the Stage 2 requirements and follows the sample collection sites consistent with the IDSE requirements. And some states like Oregon actually can require standard monitoring to be completed, so that 1-year monitoring prior to Stage 2 compliance monitoring. Some states can also require an updated IDSE or similar evaluation for modified systems to re-evaluate their monitoring sites. So again, it's important that water system contact their state to find exactly what their state requires if you're a new system or system that changed your water treatment facility to include disinfectants to completely understand what your DBP requirements are in terms of choosing the monitoring sites. Here are 2 guidance manuals that were developed by the EPA. One is a 434-page manual designed for all systems and covers the various components of the IDSE. It provides the requirements for each IDSE option. For example, for standard monitoring, with the standard monitoring chapter, which is chapter 7, it provides step-by-step guidance on selecting IDSE compliant monitoring sites, how to develop a standard monitoring plan, and how to use monitoring sites to select Stage 2 compliant monitoring sites, as well as preparing an IDSE report to submit to the EPA and the state. The other manual is a 126-page manual from the EPA, and it's similar to the one above, but it's geared towards smaller system. So it omits the sections about system-specific studies, which may not be applicable to small systems since they may not have the capacity to conduct one, or they may not have historical data to complete that option. So these guides are still helpful for systems who need to complete a compliance monitoring plan. It just gives you a rough idea of what exactly is required to choose your monitoring sites. So a compliance monitoring plan was supposed to be developed after an IDSE was complete and details how a water system plans on complying with the stage 2 monitoring requirements. The plan requires monitoring locations representative of high TTHM and HA5 concentrations, a sampling schedule which indicates the dates, and a sketch of the distribution system laying out the piping system features like wells, storage tanks, and the sampling location. EPA has a generalized template that is available to everyone, but it is recommended to check with their state agency to see if they have their own template, which might differ slightly from EPA's or other states. And once the water system has an established plan, but make modifications to their systems afterwards, they will most likely have to submit an updated compliance plan as well. Water systems, again, should contact their states to see what the proper procedures are. Here's the EPA template that I just mentioned. It's an 11-page template with instructions. It's pretty simple. The water system needs to include their general information about their system, so system type, population served, what their source is, then what their population size is, then the monitoring sites and dates for collecting TTHM and HA5 samples, and a sketch of the distribution system. The template also includes information on who to submit a completed plan to within EPA if you want to, because I believe they still are collecting information of this. Now I'll show you 2 examples of compliance monitoring plan templates from state agencies. The first one is from North Carolina DEQ. It's a 15-page template with a 8-page instruction. This template is much more comprehensive. It includes additional monitoring components like chlorine dioxide, TOC, DBP precursors. It also includes guidance on where to collect these samples, as well as MCL information of each. The state also encourages any system modifications to be made, or if system modifications are made, to modify their plan and to resubmit it to the state. They also have a shorter plan, which is similar to EPA's, geared more towards systems that purchase water. But I've included a screenshot of their DBP webpage where their form and their instructions are located. So if you access the link on the bottom of the slide, you can access this page and find all the information that you'll need. The next template is from Pennsylvania DEP. Pennsylvania has an extensive DBP program and has a variety of useful resources on their web pages. One of them is their compliance monitoring plan template, which is 27 pages long with 10 pages of instructions. At first glance, you might think this is significantly longer than the other ones, but the components on the template is pretty much similar to North Carolina DEQs and some other states that have all these comprehensive information on their template. But for Pennsylvania, they actually do include an example of a completed template, which can be used as a reference guide when completing your own plan. And just to show you how some states can differ, for Pennsylvania, they actually don't require a schematic of the distribution system. It's optional. You can include it if you want. But again, it's advised that you should check with your state agency to see if they have their own template, or even ask them what exactly their compliance monitoring plan is required to have. So now that we have covered the monitoring plan, let's look at the actual monitoring requirements. So monitoring requirements, specifically number of samples collected and the frequency at which these samples are collected, will be dependent on the system's source water type, population served. Generally, for routine sampling, most systems will be on quarterly monitoring, unless you're a smaller system, which you'll probably be on annual monitoring. Systems measuring annually are required to monitor on the peak historical month, which is the month with the highest TTHM and highest HA5, or generally it's the warmest temperature month, but this could differ. Originally in the stage 1, you had to use the warmest temperature month, but they revised that portion in the stage 2. And all systems will have to follow this month. Consecutive systems or combined systems will also follow the surface water requirements of the monitoring requirements if the wholesale system uses any source that is surface water. Consecutive systems will also follow the population of the largest distribution system. Water systems are able to qualify for reduced monitoring if their system demonstrates low TTHM and HA5 levels. This can be longer sampling frequency, so changing from quarterly to annually, or it could be lower number of samples required to be collected. To be more specific, once a system finishes 4 consecutive quarters of monitoring and their local running annual average of TTHM and HA5, so the average of 4 quarters at all locations were less than or equal to half the MCL, or 0.04 milligrams per liter, or 0.03 milligrams per liter for HA5, then the system can qualify for reduced monitoring. For systems measuring annually, after 4 quarters, every sample results must be below half the MCL to qualify for reduced monitoring. And for subpart H systems, which is a term you're going to see a lot on these monitoring requirement tables that I'll be talking about later. These are systems that use surface water sources or groundwater sources that are under the direct influence of surface water. These systems will have to demonstrate a RAA, or running annual average, of 4 milligrams per liter or less for TOC. These systems should be collecting TOC samples monthly, so it'll be the average of the 12 consecutive months of data. And to remain on reduced monitoring, for quarterly systems, each LRA must be below half the MCL. Systems on annual or triennial frequency will require each sample to be below 3/4 of the MCL. Subpart H systems will also need to maintain a TOC RA of 4.0 milligram per liter or less. I know I'm talking a lot about these numbers, but it'll all make sense after I show you a simplified table that will help you figure out what exactly you need to know. Now, once the system is reduced, they could be required to return to increased monitoring again if the LRAA of any of the location of their monitoring sites exceeds half the TTHM or HA5 MCL, or if any single sample exceeded 3/4 of the TTHM or HA5 MCL, or if the source water RA exceeded 4 milligrams per liter. Any systems on quarterly monitoring are not subject to increased monitoring, but will be required to complete an operational evaluation level, which I'll be talking about later. So here are following a few resources that are designed to assist water systems better understand what exactly I just talked about and to comply with the monitoring and sampling requirements. The first is a Stage 2 DBPR monitoring chart from North Carolina DEQ. It's a one-page chart that is handy for operators to understand the monitoring requirements for their system. There's actually 2 charts on the DEQ's website. One is for groundwater systems and one is for subpart H systems, and that's the one that you see on the screen right now. The chart lists the monitoring requirements for routine, reduced, and increased monitoring on the table. So you can tell that depending on the population size, your frequency will differ. And once you're on reduced or increased, you can tell if your frequency increases or reduces, or if the required number of samples increases or decreases. The chart also includes on the bottom the conditions that have to be met to obtain reduced monitoring, or to qualify for reduced monitoring, what happens or what causes your system to go back to routine, or what causes increased monitoring. Here is another chart from Pennsylvania DEP. It's a more comprehensive table that provides the monitoring requirements for not just HA5 TGM, but bromate, chlorine dioxide, TOC, and disinfectant residuals. So it's 16 pages long and includes tables which provides information on where to take samples, how many samples are required, criteria for reduced, increased monitoring, and how to determine if there's an MCL violation. Some parts of the table is more specific for water system in Pennsylvania, but the general information should be universal for most states. So the combination of this chart as well as North Carolina should help you keep track of what your monitoring requirements are. The next few resources will provide resources on proper sample collection procedures for TTHMs and HA5. The first resource we have is Illinois EPA's Chapter 10 of the Sample Collector's Handbook, which focuses on DBPs specifically. It's a 21-page handbook, and it again recaps all the monitoring and sample requirements under Stage 2, but it also includes sample collection tips from TTHM and HA5. I found this to be a very handy handbook to gain a general understanding of the Stage 2 DBPR requirements, and it runs down the IDSE requirements, OEL requirements, monitoring requirements, all the requirements that you have to know to comply with the rule. I also wanted to include some videos of sampling procedures, which I found to be informative. The first one is a 14-minute video from North Dakota DQ, and some components of this video is geared towards systems in North Dakota, but it showcases the components of a sampling kit for TTHM and HA5, the proper techniques and considerations when you're collecting samples, and it also includes a demonstration of chlorine residual sampling as well. The video also highlights that water systems should contact their laboratory before sampling to see what analysis method they use for analyzing DBPs, because this could change the sample collection procedures. Water systems should also contact their state to see if the laboratory is certified to conduct DBP analysis as well. So there's just some precautions you should take before sampling, as well as the actual sampling procedure. Minnesota Department of Health also has videos demonstrating sampling techniques. These are shorter videos. One is 3 minutes long, and it's catered towards TTHM, while demonstrating the EPA method 524.3, and the other is a 2-minute video for collecting HA5 samples following the EPA method 552.2. Minnesota Department of Health also has a 4-page fact sheet with written instructions on sample collection for both methods. The guide will provide tips to avoid collecting improper samples and tips to collect samples to properly represent DBP levels in the distribution system. The video also talks about, again, what kind of tips that you should know before collecting samples and precautions that you should make. So now that water systems have collected their water samples and got their results back from the laboratory, they are required to use that analysis data to calculate the operational evaluation level. So this is still required by every water systems complete, the OEL. It's a new requirement under the Stage 2 DBPR for water systems, and it's designed for water systems that are on quarterly frequency. It provides a system with an early warning for systems which may be experiencing increased levels of DBPs, and to allow water systems to take actions to reduce DBP concentration before an MCO violation occurs. Since correcting a DBP DBP causing problem can take weeks or months, it's a very important component of the Stage 2 regulation to help systems avoid violations and maintain compliance. So the OEL is calculated the same way an LRAA is calculated, but it uses the current quarter's data twice, along with the 2 previous quarters' data. This method predicts the next quarter's results to be the same as the current quarter, and prepares systems so that if there is an OEL exceedance now, and next month's results ended up being higher than the current quarter's results, the systems will be closer to a MCO violation, and the conducting of the evaluation would have been beneficial to knowing that they have predicted that there might be an exceedance or MCO violation, and they could prepare way in advance before the next quarter's results. So again, you can see on the screen, the PowerPoint, the way to calculate is 2 times the current quarter's TTHM or HA5 results, then add the previous 2 quarters and divide that by 4. And if the calculated OEL exceeds the HA5 or TTHM MCL, that's considered an exceedance. The system will be required to notify the state within a certain number of days This number can differ from state to state. Water systems will be required to conduct a operational evaluation to determine the cause of the exceedance and submit a report to the state within 90 days of the exceedance, discussing what the cause was and what are the potential changes that they can or remedies they can make to fix that problem. The evaluation includes an examination of the raw water source, treatment, and distribution practices that may potentially cause these DBP formations. And these can include storage tank operations, excess storage capacity, distribution system flushing practices, which may be done improperly, changes in source water or source water quality, or changes in treatment that and treated water quality, which is causing higher levels of TOC to enter the distribution system, causing higher levels of DBPs to form. Consecutive systems who purchase water are also required to complete an evaluation if there is a OEL exceedance, but since they have no control over the quality of the water they receive, they should focus on the distribution system component of the evaluation. This is one of the challenges that many consecutive systems face, since they purchase water, they might not be able to have say in with the wholesale system of how they should treat their water. But a consecutive system can still manage water age, how often flushing is conducted within their distribution system, and general operation and maintenance practices, which can lower DBP formation. Once a system is evaluated, the water system must identify steps to minimize exceedances. Here are some common methods to improve DBP formation, or to reduce the formation of DBPs in the treatment plant. Water systems can try to improve DBP precursor removal from the source by implementing enhanced coagulation or softening, or by adding oxidants. They can implement membrane filtration, such as nanofiltration or reverse osmosis, to again increase TOC removal, or they can use granulated activated carbon. Systems can also adjust the pH of their treated water systems to balance the TTHM and HAA5 formation, since TTHMs prefer to form in higher pH and HAA5 prefers lower pH. Water systems can also use alternate disinfectants like chlorines, chlorine dioxide, UV, and ozone, since all these options form less DBPs compared to chlorine. But there are pros and cons for each method. For example, UV ozone, they might have high initial costs to implement. Chloramines are considered to be great alternatives to chlorine, since they they produce less DBPs, but there are also other complications with chloramines. It'll ultimately depend on the cost of each option and if the systems can afford it. Water systems can also try to minimize DBP formation within their distribution system by reducing the water age within storage tanks and reducing the hydraulic residence time in their pipes. The longer the water sits in the pipe, there's a higher chance DBPs can form. Water systems can also try reducing disinfectant demand by cleaning or replacing pipes, or implement periodic flushing, since aging pipes can cause higher disinfectant demand due to presence of corrosion byproducts, biofilm, and sediment deposits. Booster disinfection is another option that systems can implement in the distribution system to increase disinfectant residuals only in areas that require it. So you would implement this in areas that you know have historically shown higher TTHM and HAA5 concentrations. But the advantage of this is, again, it limits it to certain areas while reducing the chlorine residual in within the actual plant. So there will be less chances for DBPs to form in the rest of the distribution system. Here are some resources to help water systems with the OEL process. This is the OEL Guidance Manual from the EPA. It's a 180-page manual which outlines the requirements of the OEL and the evaluations that are associated with the OEL. It includes guidance on how to calculate the OEL, documents such as checklists to help water systems determine the cause of the OEL exceedance at either the operation water treatment facility, distribution system, or at the source. OEL exceedance and reporting forms, a flow chart, bunch of flow charts to help you understand the steps required for water systems to take to conduct an evaluation. And it also includes examples of OEL reports to give water systems an idea of what's required in the report, what to look out for. And it includes an extensive reviews of options that water systems can implement to reduce DBP formation and maintain compliance. So the options that I talked previously, those are all mentioned in this guidance manual. It provides advantages and disadvantages potentially, and it'll help you help water systems understand what our options are available to them. The next resources is from Pennsylvania DEP, and it's a tool called the Water Quality Assessment Software. So this is an Excel spreadsheet, and it's designed to assist water systems to track their DBP data, and it automatically calculates operational evaluation levels. So the tool tracks various water quality parameters as well, such as TOC, chlorine, pH, temperature, and system-specific parameters to track DBP trends, and helps facilities set goals to optimize their system. So the picture on the right here is a screenshot of the actual tool. It's the TTHM and HA5 component of the spreadsheet. Basically, once you receive your analysis results from the laboratory, you can enter that results into the spreadsheet. So the individual quarterly data, where the tool will generate graphs to easily interpret your DBP trends. So whether your DBP trends are your HA5 or TTM are increasing during the past quarter, it also gives you a chart showing you what your goals are and how much your system is exceeding from the goals. So it gives you an idea of the need to lower your DBPs. And it also has a section where it will automatically calculate your OEL for you. So it's just a handy tool all around to help you manage your DBP data as well as your requirements from the OEL. The next resource is the fact sheet that I mentioned previously. It's from Washington Department of Health, and it's the alternate disinfectant fact sheet. It's a 2-page fact sheet, and it has the table of alternate disinfectants, provides the pros and cons of each alternate disinfectant, and it just gives you water systems considering changing their disinfection option to understand what options are available and what option may fit their facility the most. Here's another resource on DBP Control Strategies. This is a 20-page guidance document from Florida Rural Water Association. It provides a list of treatment technique recommendations for small and medium-sized systems. The guidance document itself provides a summary of the factors that can affect DBP formation, and it gives you a recommendation of completing a 5-step aggressive cleaning and flushing programs, which Florida Rural Water mentions that this method can achieve an expected 30% reduction of TTHM and HA5 from, again, smaller to medium-sized systems. And if that option fails, the manual recommends a bunch of treatment installation options as well. These treatment options are ranked from 1 to 6 in terms of costs and operator knowledge that are required to operate that treatment option, and it ranks each individual treatment technique from 1 to 6 using that criteria to give you a better idea of which options might be beneficial and which options might not suit your system. Each of these treatment techniques are supplemented with descriptions as well as case studies that shows how effective each individual options were. The next resource is also from Florida Rural Water. It's a 4-page fact sheet which serves as a troubleshooting guide to link the cause of DBPs to various observed process changes and provide remedies depending on those observations. So for example, one of the observations is DBP excursion was occurring in the distribution system following a long period of hot weather. If you look at the table, it provides a probable cause of the increased increase in DBPs due to biogrowth, which is causing flow-free chlorine to react with increased organic matter. And this increased growth could be caused by increased period of hot weather. And as a remedy, the table recommends increasing flushing frequencies or change in the disinfectants. So this is a resource that should serve as a useful tool for water systems to complete their evaluation to figure out what causing the problems with DBPs in their system and what are the options to fix that to maintain compliance. Now let's talk about what happens if a system fails to comply with the stage 2 requirements. So if a system fails to monitor and collect the required number of samples in accordance to the sampling schedule, or fails to submit an OEL report, the system incurs a monitoring and reporting violation, in which case systems will be required to issue a Tier 3 public notification within a year and collect the missing samples or submit the missing OEL report. Water systems may have a chance to include the notification in their CCR if the state allows it. Now, if an MCL violation is incurred, so if the LRAA for HA5 or TTHM exceeds at any site exceeds the MCL, systems will be required to issue a Tier 2 public notification within 30 days. Systems on reduced monitoring will have to return to routine monitoring, and some systems on routine monitoring will have increased monitoring requirements. Systems will also have to work with work to correct the issues causing the problem. And the resource that I have on this slide is EPA's public notification templates. They have a slew of templates that they can use for Tier 1 through 1 and 2 and 3 notifications, and they have templates for DBP related public notification requirements. So if you click on the link, it'll take you to the main EPA page where you can click on the template to download, and you should be able to find the one that you're looking for. And for the public, for the dates that you're required to notify, I'm not 100% sure if this is universal. Some states might require a little bit more stringent requirement for public notification. So this will be another one where it should be best to contact your state to figure out the exact requirements or how quickly you have to notify the public about if there was a violation. Now that I've went over all the requirements, I'll go over a few manuals that provides more comprehensive information and combines the individual requirements that I covered into a single resource. The first is the Stage 1 DBPR Compliance Basic Guide from EPA. There's actually 3 different guides for Stage 1 DBP compliance, and each guide is catered for different systems using different disinfectants. The first guide, which is their basic guide, which is 77 pages, is for systems using chemical disinfectants that serves less than 10,000 people. This is, again, a comprehensive guide that outlines what DBPs are, why the Stage 1 DBPR was developed, monitoring requirements under the Stage 1 DBPR, how to determine if a system is in compliance, how to maintain compliance, reporting requirements, and how the Stage 1 DBPR can affect systems trying to comply with other regulations. This is the Stage 2 DBPR Guidance Manual for small systems, which is similar to the one that I mentioned above or previously, but for Stage 2. This is also from the EPA. It's a 57-page guidance manual, and it provides an outline of the Stage 2 requirements. So it'll outline the compliance monitoring requirements, how to select monitoring sites, how to develop a compliance monitoring plan, how to calculate your operational validation level, and tips for those that are performing an evaluation to locate and fix problems. It also includes public notification requirements, and also includes information on financial assistance opportunities, which are available to water systems to comply with the Stage 2 DBPR. So, for example, systems may be required to make change. The only option small systems may have is to implement new treatment technologies, but they may not have the funds to do that. It'll talk about funding opportunities. So the state revolving fund, for example, that systems can apply funding for to fix their system. The next resource is a 460-page guidance manual, again from the EPA. This is on simultaneous compliance for the long-term 2 enhanced surface water treatment rule and the stage 2 DBPR. So this manual is designed to help water systems identify and mitigate potential compliance issues with the Safe Drinking Water Act regulations, which may arise when water systems make changes to their systems to comply with the LT2 and the stage 2 DBPR. This manual should only be used by water systems that already know that they are making changes to their systems to comply with LT2 and stage 2. The manual provides a list of system modifications and treatment techniques that helps meet the LT2 and stage 2 requirements, while providing a comprehensive review of each option by listing the advantages and disadvantages, and then providing a review of how it can affect other rules. So for example, on the slide I have here is a section on the enhanced coagulation practice. So it provides information on how the option benefits the stage 2 requirements by lowering DBP precursor formation or DBP precursors from the source, but it also lists potential compliance issues. So in this case, one of them is concerns with corrosion due to lowered pH from the enhanced coagulation, which can potentially cause compliance issues with the lead and copper rule. Excuse me. So if a water system that knows that they're making changes to their system, they should check this manual just to make sure that whatever option that they're using doesn't have previous history with compliance issues. And if they do, to make sure that they will be able to work around that issue and make sure they're in compliance with the other rules along with the stage 2 DBPR. The final manual that I'll cover is the stage 2 DBPR for consecutive systems guidance manual. This is also from the EPA. It's a 73-page guidance manual, and it's an introductory guide to help operators learn about the stage 2 requirements for consecutive systems. So again, if I mentioned before, consecutive systems have increased challenges since they don't have control to the quality of the water that they receive. This guide will provide what compliance options are available for consecutive systems since they have no control, communication strategies that they can implement with the whole cell system to improve water quality if the water quality if you know the receiving water quality isn't the best, and steps to develop consecutive system compliance strategies to meet the stage 2 monitoring and reporting requirements. So it'll give you a guide of what operational changes that they can make within the distribution systems to reduce the amount of DBPs that that they are measuring from their system. Oops, sorry about that. Now for the next few resources, I'll feature several past webinar recordings on DBPR compliance. The first webinar we have here is a past recording from EPA Small System Monthly Webinar Series. This webinar was broadcasted back in June 2016 and has a speaker from EPA providing a summary of the stage 2 rules, monitoring and reporting requirements, while reviewing issues that EPA has found from consecutive systems, and provides methods that these consecutive systems can implement to reduce DBP formation. The webinar also includes a speaker from Washington Department of Health discussing DBP MCL exceedance issues from small systems that they have encountered in the state of Washington, and provides examples of treatment modifications or operational changes which have been implemented to those systems and whether they were successful or not to meet compliance. The next webinar is another webinar from the EPA Small Systems series. This webinar was broadcasted back in April of 2019, and it focuses more on the compliance issues faced by water systems with Stage 2 DBPR. So the webinar will provide a review of the finding from EPA's 2018 in-depth analysis, which was a review conducted by EPA in various states to identify Safe Drinking Water Act challenges that many systems face, and best practices to develop tools and resources to help water systems better comply with the SCWA. This webinar specifically focused on the DBPR portion of the analysis, since it was found that the highest number of health-based violations for community water systems were Stage 2 DBPR violations, and majority of those systems and violations were consecutive systems. So this webinar focuses on reviewing the compliance challenges that EPA noticed during this analysis and provides solutions to help consecutive systems minimize DBP formation. The webinar also provides a review of issues public water systems face during simultaneous compliance with the Stage 2 DBPR and other drinking water regulations. So this will go in hand with that compliance manual that I mentioned, that I've showed previously with complying with other state drinking water regulations. And for those that are curious, I've also included EPA's final report on the in-depth analysis as one of the resources. This was published pretty recently, I think in 2019. The report includes a summary of the violations and data gathered nationwide during the analysis to show data such as what regions or what states had more violations or had more Stage 2 violations, what type of systems had more violations, did your source water type matter, how has violations changed over time, and several violation and population-based analysis to give water systems a better idea of how their water system performs compared to others. And if you're a system that is experiencing violations within that group, and it's higher than the average of what that group is, it can help you get the idea of what could be the potential cause of that DBP formation from this analysis report. So this analysis report so EPA worked with more than 30 states to gather information on the challenges faced by systems, as well as best practices which are implemented by water systems in various states. And this report developed a list of recommendations to help systems avoid violations. So the report also includes a summary of best approaches to optimize water systems to reduce DBPR violations. This could be, again, during treatment or within the distribution system. It'll just give you a list of best practices that have shown to historically be beneficial for water systems. So all these options were developed through EPA's area-wide optimization program, which I'll talk about in the next slide, actually. So basically the summary of this is that it shows water systems and the history of the violations that are occurring throughout the U.S. and the options that are available, the best practices that are available to help water systems comply with the Stage 2 DBPR rule. So I mentioned just now what the area-wide optimization program is. This is the final resource that I'll be covering in this webinar. It's a 4-part webinar series from the Association of State Drinking Water Administration on disinfection byproducts, or reducing disinfection byproducts through optimization. This webinar features speakers from EPA who have worked with the area-wide optimization program and experts from various states to share optimization-based tools and approaches that have been implemented by individual states to help water systems control DBP-related problems. So I know there are some states that have their own area-wide optimization programs, but basically this is the EPA's program where they have a bunch of states that provided resources on their end. So examples would be what kind of best practices that helped water system within their states. It was a means for states to share all that information and EPA to compile that information and create an individual report that lists all these best practices to help water systems understand what they can do to reduce DBPs and share those optimization tools. So this webinar is intended more for state personnel who are trying to learn more about optimization strategies, and if they want to include one in their state and learn about what other states have done to solve DBP compliance issues. There's 4 webinars for this. I believe they're both, each of these are around 2 hours long, but they go hand in hand. The first webinar introduces the program and starts talking about the AWOP program. Then the second and third webinar talks about what states have done to control DBP formation within the plant and distribution systems. And the last webinar will talk about how states can implement these optimization strategies for water systems within their state. And the link to all the webinars can be found on the slide down here. So at this point, I will switch my screen to, here we go. Now I'll actually show you how to use the wateropera.org website and how you can find these resources as well as other resources. So once you go to wateropera.org, this is our main web page. It's fairly simple design. At the very top, you have your option menus, which will be your home page, events calendar page, resource library, as well as our newsletters. You can find our main page as well, these shortcuts to the individual pages. So let's first search the calendar. So our calendar, as I mentioned before, we collect events from over 800 organizations and list them in our single calendar. And the way you can search for, currently the calendar is blank. The way to populate our calendar is to use our filter option. We have category, type, state, and sponsor. Category would be what the event will be discussing. Type will be what kind of event is it? Is it a conference? Is it a webinar? Is it a standard training? State would be what state the event takes place in, and sponsor would be the organization that is hosting the event. So for example, one of the categories that we have is disinfection and disinfection byproducts, which is right here. So if we choose that as the category, this will populate the calendar. These are all the events that are related to DBP related topics. And since we're about to end May, let's look at what events are available in June. So first glance, if you look at here, you see HAWK chlorine analysis. This is an event that's hosted from HAWK, which, if you know, they produce a lot of chemistry analysis equipment. And if this sounds like an event that may be interesting, or if you know that on June 4th you're free and you might want to do some training to get some continuing education credits, go ahead and click on this event. It'll give you all the information, the date, location, if that's applicable. You know, these days a lot of these events are switching to an online webinar format, so a lot of events you might find will be webinar format. This one will be one of those webinar or live online trainings. You'll find the link to the actual registration page, details of what the event is going to cover, contact information, the cost, and the credits that are offered. So if we click on the link here, it should take you to HAWK's page, and here's their event page where you can register. And if you look at it for the hours approved, CEU is approved in most states. So that gives you an idea of what events, if you're looking for your CEUs, this calendar can help you find those kind of events. Let's see, another event that we can look for. TEACS is another, Texas Extension is another organization that does trainings around the country. This is more on groundwater production, but it looks like it talks about disinfection as well. So there's a variety of training opportunities that you can find. Let's say you're looking more, if you're stuck at home and you want to learn more about webinars, you can add another filter option. So let's choose type, and webinar live online. This will cut down on your searches more. And if you click on one of these, I believe this is Missouri Rural Water Association. It's a training on drinking water regulations update. And if you look at the details, it covers stage 2 DBP rule. So updates on the stage 2 DBP rule. So if you're interested in this course, you can go ahead and register for this course as well by click on the link to their website. Now, if you go over to the resource library tab up here and click on search for documents, that will take you to our library. Similar to our calendar, you have 4 different filter options to populate the search that you're looking for. Category, again, would be the topic of the document that you're looking for. Type would be what kind of resource are you looking for? Are you looking for fact sheets, presentations, videos such as webinars? State would be if a document is specific to a state. So if you're looking for state-specific regulations, you can choose that state option to choose your state to filter out documents that may be applicable to only your state. And host would be the host that developed the document and the link to the host website. So let's go ahead and choose disinfection and disinfection byproducts are again one of the categories. So if we choose that and retrieve documents, that'll currently give you 798 search results. You can again look through all of these, but that might be daunting for some of you, and a lot of these documents may not just be specific to DBPs. So if you are looking to reduce your search, you can also use your keywords. And for example, let's search DBP. And now that'll cut your search results down to 300. And if we start looking through here, you'll find EPA documents, as well as documents from a bunch of other organizations. And if you look at the 4th document here is the alternate disinfectants using disinfection other than chlorine. This is the document, this is a fact sheet from Washington DOH that I mentioned in the webinar. So the way the documents are listed, it's in alphabetical order of the title of the document. It'll give you the summary of the document that we reread every single document, and we kind of make a short summary and we list that to help you understand what exactly you're looking at. The source, which is the link to the actual document, the page of the actual document, as well as the link to the host organization website. So we make sure we credit them. So if you click on the document, it'll open the document with the link to the host's organization. So again, all credits are given to the host. And there's you can also add additional filters. So let's say you actually want webinars specific to DBPs. You can choose videos, which is filter into type, retrieve documents. This will give you a bunch of videos, EPA webinar recordings, as well as the sampling videos that I've mentioned in the webinar that should be on here as well. And if you want to look for documents specifically from a specific host, you can choose host, choose, for example, US EPA, and it'll give you all just US EPA documents related to DBPs. Additionally, on our website, we have newsletters that we develop every 2 weeks for our operator newsletter, and we send these out weekly or bi-monthly, and it kind of gives you can find our past newsletters on our newsletter tab up here, as well as a way to register for the newsletter itself. If you click on it, it'll give you recent news, recent updates in the water and wastewater industry. It'll give you some information on free webinars that are available to operators, as well as highlight certain resources from our document library. What else is there? So, and if you scroll to the bottom of our webpage, you can find our contact information if you would like to contact us. If you need help searching for specific documents, you can go ahead and email us or call us whenever you want, and we'll try to help you find information. If you need information getting in contact with specific personnel that can help you, for example, with DBP compliance in your state, we can help you search for that person. So I think that's all I have for the presentation now. So I'd like to move on to the questions that we have gotten from you guys. So let me pull that up. Okay, so we have several questions that I'll go over quickly. The first question is, what are inexpensive ways to reduce DBPs for really small systems in the Washington state? All the methods I read about are really expensive, but an old experienced water manager in a nearby system had success with multiple air injection nozzles and powered exhaust fans to rid the storage tank of volatile gases and chloroform and bromodichloromethane. So yeah, I believe the cheapest option that small systems can implement first is to work with their distribution system and try to develop a flushing program, or if they have the option, clean their distribution system and see if that reduces TTHMs. I know I read a lot of case studies where water may be stagnant in their storage tank, and because of that, even if they added a mixer in their storage tank, that didn't completely mix their water and that kept all the older water at the bottom or at the top and didn't recirculate the water the new water that was coming in from the bottom of the tank. So there are a variety of ways to evaluate your distribution system. And again, I'm not an expert, but I would recommend checking there first. The second question is, can you describe how a public water system can push DBP formation towards HA5s to reduce TTHMs? Are there ways other than reducing pH? So yes, controlling pH is one way to try to shift the formation of HA5s other than TTHMs. I know that if the precursors to form TTHMs are more, even if you shift the pH, it'll still create more TTHMs. As far as I'm aware, there isn't, other than pH, there is no way to control which forms more. That would be another one that we can follow up and try to help you find more information on, or more research studies that have been conducted to see if there's a solution for that. What options are available for purchased water systems? So I mentioned several manuals as well as options for consecutive systems that purchase water. The only option they may have is to control their DBP operation. So try to implement a flushing program, evaluate their distribution operation maintenance. If they have a wholesale system that is cooperative, you can try to communicate with them more, give them tips on how they can reduce DBPs on their end, or that to strengthen the need to reduce DBPs. Again, I check out the manual that I have mentioned in this compliance manual, which would be this one. Try to read this manual. It might give you a better idea of how you can manage public purchase water systems. The next question is there software available to support DBP monitoring? How to control DBPs in rural, far remote areas that have no access to digital systems? I'm sure there are a lot of systems that vendors have created to automatically measure DBPs. I'm not aware of them at the top of my head, but in terms of to support DBP monitoring, there was that PADP Excel spreadsheet that I mentioned where it can help you with managing your DBP monitoring results to better understand what your DBP concentration is within your system and help you set goals to reduce, if you're trying to reduce TTHMs or HA5s, ways to reduce that. And if you are in a rural area with no access to digital systems, I'm not sure what, I believe the best option for those systems would be to contact your state rural water association, and they may be able to help you install digital systems if required, help you find out a way to get funding for that, or help your operator there get more knowledge about what exactly they have to do to monitor the DBPs better, and develop controlling plans from them. Chlorination, another question, chlorination versus UV for disinfection, which is better in the long run? As far as I'm aware, I believe UV is better for the long run. I'm not 100% sure on this one because this would depend on your source water, how much money you have, what manpower you have in your treatment facility, and again, how much money you have to implement a UV system, and how often you can maintain your UV systems. I know there are much more and more UV technologies like UV LEDs that are being developed, which require less maintenance, and it's cheaper to operate. That would definitely be better to reduce your reusing chlorine as your disinfectant source. But again, depending on your source water quality, UV can produce DBPs as well, or complicate other compliance issues. So I would check with, again, check your water quality, check with your state if UV is the best option for your system. Did you find any examples of consecutive systems that incorporated water quality standards into their purchasing agreements so they weren't receiving high DBP water? It is often very costly for a consecutive system to flush poor quality water that their wholesale sends them. I have not read specifically about a wholesale system or a consecutive system that was able to communicate with their a wholesale system, with their consecutive system and their wholesale system. I would check this again out. This would be another one where we can get back to you to see if we can find any case studies that's been conducted in the past. I would suggest contacting your state to see if there are any examples of consecutive systems on their records that were able to complete this. It is costly for consecutive system to do flushing program, especially if it expands along distribution network. So again, this will be another one where you can contact your state to get more information on. And I believe that's all the questions that we have for now. Again, if you have any more questions, feel free to contact us after this webinar to either my email address, which is located at the very top there, or Steve Wilson, which is my supervisor. We will try to get back to you as soon as possible. And for the resources that we covered, I know I covered a lot, but there are a bunch of more resources available online, and I know I couldn't cover all of them. So if you have the time, go ahead, please feel free to check our document library. There might be some documents on there that may be able to answer some of the questions I wasn't able to get to you today, such as the case studies. So it's definitely worthwhile to check our library out. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. And at this point, I think I'll go ahead and end this webinar. So thank you very much for attending this webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us at a later date. Thank you.